Okay, let's get going. Good afternoon, everyone. Interesting group. We've already got nearly 60 people here, and I can see from the list that there are teachers, there are parents, there are old boys, there are boys, Jeppe boys. So a fantastic group, and the first in this series of extramural focus talks. Different issues being discussed, sometimes by experts, sometimes by people outside Jeppe, sometimes in. So you need to look at that program and see what interests you. Obviously, you may not want to see all of them. There may be other things on at the time, but that's not a bad thing if we're busy. But certainly there's something for everyone in this extramural focus series. And we're looking at, in particular, sport and cultural activities, the extramural activities that the school offers, and a full range of activities that schools like this do. So this afternoon we've got Mr. Reg Hammond, who is a psychologist. He does a lot of work at Jeppe and outside Jeppe professionally, and he coaches the first rugby team with Mr. Spillhouse and Mr. Fenter. So he has hands-on experience of stress. There's a few things more stressful than coaching the first team. And Mr. Hammond, you had a very stressful time coaching the under-16A, very fulfilling. And we'll never forget how you had to deal with the big disappointment of a defeat, and I think the last match of the season. And you nearly got an unbeaten season there. So you know about success and disappointment. So the format here is, if I could ask everyone who may have forgotten or has started talking, if you could just switch your mics off, so that we don't have background noise, cups being knocked over and dogs coming in and barking and things like that. But we will give an opportunity at the end if there are any questions, and we'll deal with that when we get to it. So we'll start just by us, Mr. Hammond and myself, having a conversation. But really, he's the one that we want to hear from here this afternoon. And I think, Reg, if I could start by talking about what obviously is on everyone's mind. We should be 5 or 6 weeks into the second term at Jeppe, and we're not, of course. We're in what they call the lockdown. It's extremely frustrating, and there have been disappointments along the way where we thought perhaps it would be lifted, and then it hasn't been. And it struck me that may be common to everyone. It's been a different experience for everyone, but what is common to all of us, I think, is frustration. Even if we're being very positive, we are still frustrated. And it struck me, too, that frustration, if it goes on long enough, it's about being out of control of what's happening to you, which we all are in a way. And it can lead to depression because you can't see a way out, and it affects your life in different ways. Different families affected differently. So we need to find a way, however frustrated or maybe even depressed we are, we need to find a way of dealing with it, because it's difficult, and we need mental toughness. Perhaps that's the place to start. And maybe you can talk about work you've done on that, and we'll talk a little bit about it, and perhaps you'll give us some examples of it. Carry on.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, mental toughness in general, and you've summed it up perfectly, is everything is about, we are creatures of habit, first of all. We love to get instant gratification, and we love being in control. And at this moment with lockdown, all of that has basically been taken away from us. And maybe I need to start with a module of mental toughness, and everything I believe that some of the participants today will ask will basically be linked to what I'm going to say now. So mental toughness is basically linked to 5 F's. So the first F is foundation, and foundation basically consists of 6 concepts, 6 things. The first thing there is the self-concept. Who am I? Where do I fit in? Understanding my emotions, understanding the way I think. A big part of it is self-awareness. The second one there is your values, your personal core value system. The third one there is attitude. The fourth one there is mental models, and there's simply not enough time or a way that I can give an easy example of what that is. So once again, when you go through the program in Google Classroom, you'll be able to understand that concept a little bit better. Number 5 there is the mental skills. The mental skills needed to cope with all these things that I've just mentioned. And then finally, it's habits, the way we respond, and habits are obviously linked to the mental models that I've just referred to. So that is the foundation. That's the bottom part of the 5 F's. The next one there, it's a little bit easier to understand, is fuel. And when I say fuel, it is the motives, it is the desires. And like you mentioned with lockdown, everybody wants to do something. We want to get on with our lives, but yet we have this halt at the moment. So once again, it's very difficult to there's this enthusiasm, there's all of that, and we basically need to keep it under or basically suppress it. The third one there is focus. Now once again, you've mentioned earlier about stress and anxiety and worry and depression. So as soon as that happens, our focus completely narrows. And a big part of optimal performance in sport or any field for that matter is focal flexibility. The ability sometimes to zoom out, wide eye lens view, where you can take in a lot of information and you can use that information, and then to see the bigger picture as well. And then ultimately to zone back in, where there's a type of a laser-like focus when you focus on the job at hand. Now, once again, when you stress, that focus narrows completely. You can't see the bigger picture. You're caught up in all the details, and if you are still frustrated, obviously it feeds the frustration even further, and it becomes a boiling pot. Then the fourth of the F's is flow. Now, what we do in sports psychology is, and it's something we've been working off over extensive research over the last 5 years especially, is flow between the left hemisphere of your brain, that is more your analytical things, and your right side of your brain, which is more creative. Now, if you can generate flow, that brings enthusiasm, it brings passion, it gives hope. So that flow is important. The next flow is flow between the conscious and the subconscious minds. And once again, your subconscious mind that contains all your mental models, including your attitude. So once again, someone with a little bit more of a negative attitude might struggle a lot more during this time. Certain personality types, once again, might struggle a little bit more. And then finally, the last part of this is fluctuations. And the fluctuations I refer to is, it's basically the ups and downs of life. So when things are going well, what is my attitude? Yes, and Mr. Spillhouse loves using the word grab handsful. So while you're there, maintaining momentum, reaching out, giving a bit of yourself. And then when things don't go your way, when it comes to adversity and challenge and obstacles, it's two mindsets that basically comes in. The first one, there is a growth mindset where you say, listen, this too shall pass. But I can't just wait until it passes. I need to do something. I need to become, once again, self-reflection, self-empowerment, work on myself. So after lockdown, for example, I can prepare myself to flourish in the new world after what we are experiencing now. And finally, the last of the mental states is what I call warrior's mind. That means it's laser-like focus. You are completely cut off from all the distractions and everything that is on the outside. Focus on what needs to be done. And that mentality, for example, goes with a lot of fuel and focus, and it's about getting the job done, whether you like it or not. So everything we're going to discuss today will basically be linked to those 5 F's.
Okay, Mr. Hammond, excellent start. And in case people think, well, that's a bit too much to load up, as you say, we'll give you the link to the Google Classroom at the end, so you can go at your leisure and look it up and so on. So I'll just run through the 5 F's quickly again. And there's one that I want to come back to and ask you about. The foundation, the fuel, the focus, the flow, and the fluctuations. Those were the 5. And obviously, there's interesting stuff there. Just on the focus, it struck me that let us compare ourselves to an era where there was no social media and maybe not even television. So if you go back to the Second World War, which was a terribly traumatic event for everyone involved, no television, no social media. Communication was by newspapers, by letters, and maybe by telephone. And it was impossible to focus on the war all the time because you didn't have access to it. You might read the newspaper once a day or a letter from someone. We are at the opposite end of that scale, Rich. We have constant, unending flow, there's the word flow again, of information. Some of it's fake news, some of it's real, some of it is expert, some of it isn't. It's got pictures, it's got jokes. You can sit on your phone or device 24 hours a day and never leave the subject of the virus, COVID-19, lockdown, etc. And even then, you're not getting everything. So you could spend those 24 hours again and see a whole lot of different things. And it struck me, I just want to share with you something that I have tried, where I felt I was getting depressed and disappointed and hopes up and hopes down. And I thought, I'm going to check in once a day. I'm going to check in once a day to find out what's going on, say between 5 and 6 in the evening on the radio or something like that, or a TV news bulletin. And the rest of the day, I am not going to check in with what's happening. Yeah. I find it's helped. Is this the sort of thing you're talking about with focus?
Absolutely, sir. And once again, there's all these 5 Fs are interlinked. So if you think about what you just explained, if you look at mental models. Now, mental models are, and I know it's a very difficult thing to explain, but once again, it's representations of reality. So, and that determines totally what the quality of the information that you are going to take in. So that, together with your attitude, I almost want to say the substance of your attitude will determine what you're going to do with the information. And I'm going to give an example. Someone that is prone to anxiety or stress, and that's maybe got a negative way of looking at the world. So they always see they see problems before they see possibilities. They see worry before they see opportunity. So someone like that, for example, there's loads of information out there. And the amazing thing is they will zone in on those type of information, will come into their system all the time. Now, you are one of the most positive people I know, Mr. Williams, so this definitely doesn't apply to you. But once again, it's about, and that's where the focus part comes in. What am I going to take on board? And that's why this program is absolutely so important, because there are 14 mental models of distinction. And if that's your basis, that'll determine the information that you're going to take in, and it is immensely empowering. And once again, that creates a different type of focus, if I'm answering your question.
Yes, and just to take it one bit further before we move on, I have found that you say I'm positive. I think I am positive, but this lockdown has got me down. Yeah. I mean, it's no use saying I'm a positive person, I'm going to look on the bright side. It gets to you. It does get to you. It's got to me. Mr. Gitten said the other day he had a very bad day. Even though he was being positive and having a good work, he's got lots to do, he had a bad day. So to tune out, not to avoid the issues, but to somehow get a balance. Isn't that what we're aiming at?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mr. Williams. I think the antidote to what you are explaining is hope. Now, once again, hope can be positive and negative. Hope gives us fuel. Hope helps us to focus. Hope helps us to maintain momentum. But at the same time, if that hope, if the markets continuously moved like what's happening at the moment with lockdown, with hope comes expectation and anticipation. Now, if I anticipate and I expect things to happen and to change, and it doesn't, there's no change happening, then obviously it feeds the frustration. And as long as it feeds that frustration, for example, once again, the focus narrows completely. So in a time like this, and we discussed this a little bit earlier, it's so important to continue to cultivate hope. Hope has got to be all there all the time. And that's why in a time like this where there's social distancing, the challenge is, and a lot of people struggle with this, is to zone in on you, to self-reflect, become a little bit more self-aware, investigate your strengths and weaknesses. use this time, for example, to turn your weaknesses into strengths and to reinforce the strengths that are there. Come up with a strategy of what are you going to do differently after lockdown. So that is going to keep you busy. That is going to give you, and you spoke about it earlier, routine is something that is so important in this time. Because if we wait for lockdown to end, our destination is months, maybe even away for most of these students especially in the younger grades. So we gotta create little destinations in between, little markers in between, and then gradually put our focus there.
Okay,
because we want feedback all the time.
Yeah, let's take it to a very practical level at school. So if you think of this year, the year starts and the summer sports happen. So we got cricket and water polo and everything. End of the term, those boys get their colors. Successful season for most of the teams. And at that time, I remember thinking, right, we're about to get into rugby. And suddenly, this hit us just before the rugby season started. We now have a situation where we're well into May. We should be halfway through the rugby season, and we haven't had a season at all. And think of the boy. Now, using an example, and but by using the rugby example, I'm also talking hockey. I'm talking cross country. I'm talking drama. I'm talking all the activities that were going to happen this term, and the boys who were going for distinctions and really going to work hard in the exams and so on. Now, suddenly, it's been taken away. And there is hope that we'll have a rugby season later in the year, perhaps. But meanwhile, particularly with the disappointments of the moving timetables, we still don't know what's going to happen. Whatever they say, we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. I'm also filled with anger, by the way, because I think the government is not handling it well. So it's frustration and anger, although I understand the need for the health precautions and so on. So what do you say to that boy and that young staff member, to yourself, to Mr. Spillhouse, the coaches who are all geared up for the season in all the sports and activities? What do you say to those guys? They can't just say, oh, there's no point in going on. They have to find a way of dealing with this. So in practical terms, what do you say to that boy who's in matric, looking forward to his last year of rugby, maybe in the first team, maybe he's in his first year in grade 8, and he was so looking forward to playing for the school for the first time? What do you say to him? What must he do?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Mr. Williams. And first of all, we need to take Mr. Spillhouse out of the equation. Yeah, that guy's my neighbor, and he's busy with woodwork basically day and night. So he's rearranging his whole house. So I think he's okay. But for the rest of the students and the people listening to me at the moment, I would say the first thing is control the controllables. Just control those things that are under your control. And the one string we can always play on is our own attitude, because that's an inside job. So it's working really hard at maintaining a positive attitude. And I know it isn't easy. The next thing I will most definitely advise is when you're going to a hockey season, a rugby season, academics, when you look at cultural activities, everything about this, all of that requires holistic development of the individual. So if you can't really work physically, you can maintain a certain level, but I mean, there's no contact, there's none of these things. So physically, you can't do anything. So shift your focus to mental toughness. So use this time to strengthen the powers of your mind. Learn how to use the powers of your subconscious mind. Because the main thing is, I don't believe the world will ever go back to exactly the way it was. It's going to require adaptability. So once again, this forces us to learn to be adaptable. And a big part of being adaptable is about being mentally tough. Another thing that this is going to teach you is it's an opportunity to, I've been working a lot on engaged citizenry, how to reach out and help other members of the community as Jeppe as a whole, the Human Development Department. We've been reaching out to other schools, providing our programs, trying to help. So a big part of this is, so often all the focus is basically on us. So this is a time, get your mind right, work on mental toughness, sort that part out. At the end of the day, taking that forward, it's going to make you a better sportsman, a better academic, a more balanced academic or sports person, and exactly the same for cultural activities. And then the next thing is to develop a service mentality. So after this, it's not about us. We've seen what's happening around us. So I would say those are the two things. It's definitely mental toughness and to work on a service mentality.
That mental toughness. Let's imagine now you have this sportsman, this actor. He's getting up in the morning at home in lockdown. He's missing school. He's missing his friends at the hostel if he's in the hostel. Same for the teachers. What is this mental toughness? How do you go about it? What do? You get up in the morning, and how do you become mentally tough? Fantastic. How do you develop this toughness? What do you actually do?
Yeah, Mr. Williams. So first of all, I like using the acronym POP-UP, and that is in normal circumstances. POP-UP stands for, first of all, prepare optimally. And now there's no season. We don't know what's happening with the academics. So that basically is removed from the equation. So, and the second part is to perform well under pressure. Now, once again, there's no chance of testing us. So our normal way of looking at it is now different. So what I would say is most definitely to zone in on the 8 mental skills associated with top achievers and champions. And these 8 mental skills, the first one is self-direction. So now, once again, we don't know when these things are going to stop. The goals that you might have set for yourself now is not going to work at the moment. So once again, control what is under your control. Set new goals, more short-term goals, so that you can get that feedback and you can maintain a sense of motivation. The second mental skill is called focus connection. It means I am always connected to my vision, what I want to become, the best version of myself, while at the same time focusing on the little things that I do now every day. So my challenge will be do something every day that's going to make you a little bit better. The third mental skill there is self-motivation. Now, once again, if you set goals and you see results, obviously there's a sense of motivation after that. And that is exactly the 3 mental skills that I refer to a lot in into the emotional and mental skills program that's there at the moment. Then the other thing is it's a great time to practice your emotional intelligence, which is our mental skill number 5. I'm not going to refer to everything. Mental skill number 5. So now things aren't perfect. It's times of adversity. We're not in control. There's a sense of anticipation, and there's a sense of uncertainty more than anything. So emotional intelligence becomes extremely important. Read up on emotional intelligence. And once again, apologies for all continuously referring to this program. I'm not trying to sell anything. It's free. But that is exactly what I will spend time on working. And then if you look at your last 2 mental skills associated with top achievers, it is adaptability that I've spoken about. This is a time to be adaptable, to set new goals, to come up with new ways of doing, and routine, and you've mentioned it earlier. And then the final mental skill is grit. And grit is an umbrella term for bouncing back from setbacks, determination, perseverance, resilience, and all these things, because I really believe going back after lockdown, it's going to be tough. Everything out there, it's going to be damn difficult, and we need to be adaptable, and we need to be mentally tough. So grit is going to be of the utmost importance. And once again, in the program, we refer a lot to these eight mental skills of champions.
You know, Reg, it struck me that one problem I've had, a school, and of course we're all involved with the school, parents, staff, boys, everyone. The school has a very clear routine. Monday looks like this, Tuesday looks like that, Friday night looks like that, Saturday is big sports day, Sunday everyone chills mostly. Now every day seems the same. You wake up in the morning, admittedly they are beautiful mornings at the moment, but they all look the same. And when you look at the day, it feels roughly the same, even though we now have a bit of a timetable for the academics. There's nothing else. And I'm reminded of a story of the old sailing ship captains. We're talking of a century, 2 centuries ago, where the only ships were sailing ships, and they depended on the wind. And they could take from Britain to Australia, could take 3 months. And for many, many weeks, they could be in the middle of the ocean with no land in sight and no other ships in sight. And the most important thing that they evolved over the centuries in the old sailing ships, the captain had to keep a log, had to keep a diary. And every day he had to write down where he was and where he had got to from the morning to the night. Above all, what day it was, so that at Sunday they could have a church service, although the Sunday looked like everything else. And they worked out that if they don't have some record of what they are doing and what day it is, they'll go mad, because time ceases to have any meaning. And I must say, I have to say today, I put a tie and collar on for the first day when I came on to do my class. And I thought, you know what, I'm feeling better about this, more structure. So tying up that with routine, maybe you keep a journal. Maybe you write down what you've done, what time you're going to do what. You're going to spend 2 hours doing this. You're going to spend 1 hour doing that, so that your day has some structure. And on Saturday, it's going to be different to the other days. So have you got some tips on this? Building a routine is surely crucial.
No, absolutely, sir. And I think that the thing with routine is it provides you with a sense of control. And what I've mentioned a little bit earlier, when you write everything down, it's, as a matter of fact, you are setting certain goals, and these goals, you don't have to wait for a month to see if it's happened. And like I mentioned earlier, it's about, we want instant gratification. We want to see that there's progress, that there's movement, and that's basically what I believe the journal is all about. I personally, advice that I can give will definitely to start setting goals. Where further, before you even set goals, is to, something very interesting about sports psychology is most parts of your brain can't distinguish at all the difference between metaphor and reality. So the things we see in our mind's eye and the things that are really happening, as far as your brain is concerned, it's reality, it's happening. So, and there was the story about the golfer that was in or not a golfer, he was a Jew that was in a concentration camp, and he's never played golf before in his life. And all he did while he was there, him and a friend sat together and they played with each other. They played with their own minds for starters. And the guy visualized over and over again this golf swing that he actually can play the game. And amazingly, he got out of, long story short is, he got out of the concentration camp and he was basically playing of a single handicap. And that is the power of the mind. So in the meantime, what I would suggest is to create that self-direction, which is the first mental skill, is for every single person to create a vision in their mind's eye, and then to use visualization. And once again, it's explained in the program. So you create a vision of you living your best life. So it's a future you. And once again, that provides you with a bit of hope. To a lot of people, it might sound like, I mean, it's daydreaming, and it is, until you follow it up with inspired action. So the whole idea is now, since there can't be inspired action, create that dream. It's okay to create a dream now, and then set certain goals that you're actually going to use, things you can do to accomplish what is in your vision. And then when you create this vision, make sure all the life areas are included in that. So I will definitely, there needs to be a spiritual element. There needs to be, what am I going to do? The optimal, my personal mountaintop. When I've inhabited my fullness, what will my religious life be? My spiritual life? What will my health look like? What will my academic career, my job, my vocation or academics, what will that look like? My hobbies, my family, my social life, my financial life. Those are basically the life areas, is to look at what your ideal self will look like in each one of these life areas, and then to set goals for each life area. And now to start reading up on it, to start learning about it. And then once this lockdown is over, then you can start living it. That's so, in short, what I would do.
What I've managed to do as well, I enjoy cooking. And so one of the things I've done is to make sure I cook every night. And I take it seriously. So it's something to look forward to, and it gives a structure. And I'm trying to do certain things better with the cooking, which I don't normally have time to do. But what you've just sketched out is actually quite a lot of control over the day that is ahead of you. Yeah. As opposed to lying on your back, watching the device with all this misery about COVID-19 all day, because you can all day, and you send each other messages being miserable. you can actually do that for half an hour in the morning. And from what you've said, you can do a whole lot of other things over which you have some control. And as you're talking, I'm thinking also you can control how you dream.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So if you're a rugby player and you were dreaming of first team, Craven Week, again, it's an example. There are lots of similar dreams in other fields. Maybe you say, well, probably the worst that can happen here is we don't have any rugby this year at all. So how am I going to pick up my dream next year?
Yeah, fantastic.
How am I going to do that? Instead of hoping, expect the worst. And then how do I pick up my dream when I'm 19? Everyone's in the same situation. Every rugby player in the world is in this situation. So it's not like you're being discriminated against.
Yeah, so once again, I think it's going to be about a variety. And once again, when I said about the life areas, it gives variety. And you can, and what I said a little bit earlier as well, identify your weaknesses. This is well, I hate using the word weaknesses. I like referring to growth areas. Identify your growth areas. Work on those things. And in the meantime, and I like what you say, picking up next year with whatever it is that they are going to do is there's got to be improvement. There's got to be progress that's taken place over this time. This whole COVID-19 thing can't be a waste of time. And unfortunately, I often refer in the program, I refer to go-getters and moochers. Now, your moochers, they lie around. This gives you the time to do to spend time on your phone all day, to listen to music, to sleep, to basically entertain your bad habits. But it also, and your go-getters are the ones now that say, right, but this is what I've done up until now. Whatever's worked for me, why will I want to change it? But all the areas that I can actually improve on, this is a time where I can make that better. Then you can get to a point next year, no matter what you're going to do, whether you're going to study, whether it's your sport, whether you're going to, as an actor, whatever you're going to do then you can sit back and say, it's about holistic development. Physical development has been taken away from me. There's a lot of things that I can't do, but I work on my mind. I work on my growth areas, make these things better. And after this, I'm going to start all over again with a hell of a lot of hope and continue to move in the direction of my dreams.
Just one more question for you, Reg, before we go to the audience. There's a few questions come up there. And that is, I thought the other day of Nelson Mandela. Someone quoted him on the radio. And we are complaining about being locked down. He was locked in. He was locked in for 27 years. Yeah. And for all he knew, he would never come out. He didn't know. He didn't know if he would ever come out. In fact, most people thought he wouldn't come out. And he was in a tiny cell for a lot of the time, breaking rocks, not given privileges. It got better for him as time went on, but 27 years. How did he do it?
That's I think Mr. Mandela is the perfect example. And he's mentioned quite a few times, the man that went in was most certainly not the man that came out. So there's this thing that Mr. Mark Grace, one of the most amazing men that's ever lived, what he said to me, he said, our senses was turned outwards. But true genius is actually turning your senses inwards and to pick up on the things that work for you and don't work for you. And I believe Mr. Mandela found so many things that he can improve on. And once again, it allows you to focus your attention inwards and to work on those things. And yes, he had to wait for a very, very long period of time. But in the meantime, there was definitely goals. I mean, we were lucky enough to visit the place where he was kept on one of our rugby tours, and he's got this lemon tree that he started nurturing and looking after that. So that was a goal. And at the end of the day, seeing the lemons grow it's satisfactory. It's a sense of purpose. And so while he was there, he could choose. I mentioned earlier moochers and go-getters. If he was a moocher, he could have planned revenge when he got out there. And thank goodness he didn't. But all he focused on, it was an absolute positive state of mind. He focused on certain goals, he had certain dreams, and he came out and he followed that up with inspired action. And that's exactly what we got to do. Use this time, turn your senses inwards, work on yourself, develop yourself, come up with a strategy how you can actually have an impact when we get after lockdown. Because that is exactly, and the perfect example is the one that you used, sir.
So in a way, you could say, in what way am I going to be different when I come out of the lockdown? Or am I just going to be the same? Have I put myself on hold, or have I tried to change things that I can control? Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, sir. Mr. Hillock, who is the master in charge of hockey at the school and senior housemaster at Sable, he says, Mr. Hammond, what would you suggest that parents could do to assist their boys with dealing with the anxiety that comes with a lack of sport, lack of culture, competition? And there's an aspect there too, which we haven't mentioned yet, competitiveness. Boys like to compete. You like to measure yourself, and there aren't those opportunities. So, but his question is, how do parents help their boys? Because I think in many ways the parents get more anxious than the boys on their behalf.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mr. Williams, I think first of all, if I can touch on what you mentioned with regards to competitiveness, yes, you can't compete against an opponent, but your future self that I referred to earlier, that better version of you and your current self, there should be a competition. And parents, what I've encouraged, and when I spoke to Mr. Jackson as well, or I mailed him and I said, I think this is such an important time for the boys to go through the program, yes, but at the same time to offer it to the parents, because then you have the same departure point. Your way of thinking, your mental models and everything, there's going to be a sense of similarity. So that's the second thing that I would most definitely say. Then active participation. I think, to myself, this time it's an opportunity to reconnect with yourself, to reconnect with your family members, for the parents together, maybe to set goals as a family. Where do we want to go with this? To look at family goals, but also to give each family member an opportunity to set their own goals and how they can find ways of how they can help each other to achieve their goals. So it's an opportunity to work together on a project of inhabiting our fullness for each and every single member. So it's a time where either you're going to be on your cell phone all day, or you're going to be on social media all day, or it's a time to really, really start communicating. So once again, I think a big part of it is the program, where there's a sense of a common purpose, and then obviously to understand the whole support system at the end of the day, where as a family, each member comes up with a plan, ideas of going forward. How are we as a family gonna do it better? Once again, setting short-term goals instead of looking at this one thing where as soon as lockdown ends, then we're gonna do that. Mr. Williams, sorry, that's the way we normally live. When I leave school, I will do this. When I get married, I'm going to do this. When I start with my vocation, I'm going to do this. Why wait?
Yeah.
This is the ideal time to really start. Don't wait until lockdown is over. Create something now that will really be able to have an impact as a family, as individuals at the end of the day after lockdown.
I have a story. One of the boys in one of my classes that I've been teaching online. I mean, online is not nearly as good as being in the classroom or on the sports field, but it's a lot better than nothing. So we are still connecting. It's difficult, but we're doing it. And we can set goals with that too. One of these boys, I said, how's it been at home? Because I think a lot of people are not used to being at home all the time. And let's face it, you love your family, but it can also be stressful. You can spend too much time with your family. You need sometimes to escape. And I said, who's in the family situation with you? And he said, my brother, my sister, one of our cousins, my parents, and my grandfather. So I just thought something. I said, have you ever spoken to your grandfather? And he said, no, not really. I said, why don't you take this time to interview him? Ask him about his childhood, where he was at school. Ask him all about himself. He probably would like to tell you stories, but you've never asked. And maybe you won't get a chance again after lockdown. And that'll take your mind off this bloody lockdown, the virus. Yeah. I want to go to Trent Kemper, who says, and maybe you've covered some of this before, Reg, but I think, you can say the things again. How to keep players in particular motivated in a mental sense. There won't be a sports season this year, maybe. We're not sure about that yet. Balancing with the new online learning. And how does he work with them now? I suppose we're saying to the boys themselves, set goals, write things down. If you are in a position where you are coaching, organizing, mentoring, perhaps a bit of a different approach, same principle, but how do you go about it?
So I think Jeppe has set the perfect example there, and under the guidance of Mr. Gittens and yourself and Mr. Spillhouse. I think, for example, what we are doing with the rugby at the moment is getting together, sharing ideas, learning from one another. And you mentioned earlier in the family environment, this is an ideal time to practice one of the mental skills, which is adaptability, because you spend a lot more time with members of the family. So you see the different nuances here, the different ways of doing, and with you being forced to adapt to all these different things, I really believe that it's going to be something that you're actually going to take forward with you. So during this time, it's read, get role models, look at what you are interested in, read up on these things, look at people that's made a success of their lives, learn from them. So I think it's all about creating, for coaches, it's about creating an environment where we can learn from one another. There are 16 different personality types, different ways of doing, different temperaments, and it's about zoning in and or dialing in and learning from one another as much as possible. So it's almost creating a learning environment with whoever you are surrounded with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so maybe there's two aspects to this. The one is, don't give false hope. It's no use saying, let's take the rugby example, hockey teams. It's no use saying to them, don't worry, guys, we'll get a season later. Don't worry, it'll all be okay. Well, maybe it won't. But what is more important, and I think you've touched on it there, is the connection. It's continually making the connection with your boys, hearing what they've got to say, hearing their thoughts, maybe finding a way to all watch a previous match together. I've been having a big argument with someone about Naas Botha, the old Springbok fly half from the 1980s. They said all he could do was kick. And I'm going back now and digging out what I can. There's not too much of it, but I'm digging out stuff of him running the ball. He was actually a very good distributor of the ball. He didn't tackle, but the coach said, let the other guys tackle. He wins the matches for us. So I'm actually spending time arguing with someone else about Naas Botha. It's rugby. I can't train, I can't coach, but I'm stimulated by the debate about Naas Botha. So what I'm suggesting is that coaches can find ways. Mr. Steyn is doing this with his junior boys. He's sending them interesting little exercises. But I think it's the connection, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's talking to each other.
It's exactly that. And we've spoken about, for example, long-term goals, short-term goals, but you've got to invest in a positive attitude every single morning. And then the other thing that I haven't mentioned at all in our discussion here today is something called combinatorial intelligence. And that's exactly, it's about making connections. And a big part of that is what I spoke earlier about the mental models. It's about making connections, the way I do things, looking at different ways of doing, making connections. And by doing that, during this time, first of all, your character can expand because you develop grit and all these things. The second thing is combinatorial intelligence, because you're going to look at different ways. What that forces you to do is to go into the archives and have a look at things that Naas Botha did, for example. It's making connections. It's almost forcing these boys to, and especially, and I like what you said the other day in one of the sessions that we had, sir, when you spoke about ballet, for example. What can you learn? That is making connections across diverse fields. And that is what I maybe see. What my current way of thinking, of coaching, of playing, whatever I'm doing is, what can I look at other fields of expertise? What can I learn? What can I incorporate? It really is a time where we can learn from role models. We can learn from one another. And I would say we just got to dial into that. We got to dial into personal growth, making sure that we are more after lockdown than the person that walked in into lockdown, similar to what Mr. Madiba did.
Yeah. I suppose the aim is we mustn't come out of this the same as we were before.
Absolutely.
We need to have made progress. I'm going to ask the audience. There are 66 of them still with us, which is great. I'm going to ask if there are any questions that they'd like to ask verbally or comments that you would like to say.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hammond.
Hello, Mr. Spillers.
We all, are feeling anxiety, frustration about whether there will be a winter season for sport, obviously. Now, would it not be, in your opinion, a better idea is to make a decision now and say, for 2020, there will not be any winter sport, so that we can come to terms with this thing, get over it, move on, rather than maybe living in hope, and by December we say, well, sorry, the year's now done, we can't have winter sport. Does this, the latter, does it not increase anxiety, I don't know what else, feelings amongst all of us, frustration? Which one would be the better one to do?
Sure. You're putting me on the spot here, Mr. Spillers. It'll break my heart if there's no rugby, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I think you are absolutely spot on, because what we are doing, we are creating expectations. These boys have been training since the start of lockdown, and with a dream of there might be something. And at the end of the day, all we are doing, we are feeding this dream, we are feeding the hope, there's expectations, there's all of those things. And if ultimately it's going to get to a situation where they will be informed that there's not going to be a winter season, I think they are going to be absolutely devastated. And a whole lot of counselling is going to be needed at that time.
Yeah, Mr. Spillers and Mr. Hammond, maybe this ties in with what we were saying a little bit earlier, and that is that we can say, let's assume the season is cancelled. How would I behave then? In other words, expect the worst, but maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised. I mean, isn't that another way of doing it? But you expect the worst. You say, like I said, if there's no season, what am I going to do next year? So the guys who are training and keeping fit, it's not going to do them any harm to have trained and kept fit and thought about things and then not have a season. So I'm reluctant. I'd be reluctant to cancel it if we don't actually know, but I'm also be reluctant to give false hope. Expect the worst and maybe you'll be surprised.
Yeah, Mr. Williams, I think we need to, what I would suggest is we talk to the boys about where are we going with this? Why? We got to go back to their why. Why are you training? Why are you working on improving yourself? If it is purely to have a rugby season, I think that it's the wrong mindset. So maybe it's about changing their vision. Maybe it's about changing their destination, where we say, these are the things that we are doing at the moment, and these are the benefits, and the benefits are real. So you are investing in your future by holistically developing every single part of your being. If there's a rugby season, great, you're going to be in a better position than some of the other students that we're going to come up against, some of the schools we're going to come up against. If there's no rugby season, obviously we're not doing it for the rugby season. There's a higher purpose here. It's about improving who we are at all levels. And I think if we create that dream, we're going to, I don't think that the damage at the end of the day is going to be as huge.
Yeah, it struck me while you were talking there that for some boys, indeed adults, players, every year there is no rugby season.
Yeah.
Why? Because they get injured. And I remember the boy in a first team I was involved with, school, he was made captain of rugby, and at the last practice before the first match, he broke his leg and he was out for the season. So all that work, he never played for the first team either. He was captain and he was about to play his first game. So what was interesting was that he attended every practice, even though he couldn't play. He just changed the way he thought about it. And, of course, he then carried on playing the next year. So,
Jonathan would like to just make a comment, I think.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name's Jonathan Piers. I'm Gareth Piers' dad. Going back to preparing yourself for not having a rugby season, you know, I do cycling, and my belief is you should train every day at your fullest, whether you have a match or not. And if that chance comes that you have a match, you're virtually at your peak. You know, I ride at least between 3 and 5 times a week, and I'm always ready for a race. I don't have any races, or those are all being cancelled. But if somebody said tomorrow you're going to go and do the epic, I'll pitch up and I'll do the epic. So all I'm saying is yeah, in your head, don't set those limitations. I think train every day like you are going to be in a match tomorrow, whether there is a match or not. Train.
I think that's a
sorry, sir, I think that's apologies. I think that is a fantastic comment. And reminds me, there's a Greek word, it's called meiraki. And meiraki simply means I always put my heart and my soul, I put a part of who I am into absolutely everything that I do. And that is obviously what Mr. Pierce is doing every single day of his life. And maybe this is a time to do it, where maybe there is no reward. The reward is actually the action. It is meiraki.
Reg, Mr. Hammond, maybe we need to try and find a way to tell people what to go and do right now in simple terms.
So I would definitely create a vision. Create a vision of what will that ideal version of you, what will it look like in each one of the 7 life or 8 life areas that I've mentioned a little bit earlier. Number 1. Number 2, write down goals. And once again, not just long-term goals, short-term goals as well. And then it is about the third thing I would say is identify your strengths and your growth areas and develop a strategy on developing these. And in this time, you have access to the internet, you have access to books. There are people that are immensely successful out there. What's made them so special? And once again, sorry for referring to the program again. This is not something I've sucked out of my thumb. It's 15 years of research with top achievers all over the world in various fields of expertise. This is their way of thinking. This is the mental models and the habits and the mental skills that's basically put them in a position where they are. So learn these things, develop these things, and maintain a positive frame of mind.
And look at what you can control, hey? Not what you can't control.
Absolutely.
Part of this, the structured part of it is concerned. Thank you so much, Mr. Hammond, for sharing with such energy your learning and your experience. It's been great. We're down to 50 people now, but we had well over 80 at one stage, which was fantastic. Please look at the other talks and sessions in the Extramural series, and there are going to be more. That's not just those 5, there are going to be more as well. So thanks very much, everyone, for attending.